I'm back to talk all about the GPD WIN 3 after 3 months of use, so let's go ahead and take it out! Welcome to Mike Texts It Out. I'm Mike, and I am here with the GPD WIN for my last GPD WIN 3 video ever, before I get the Steam Deck, of course. I got my confirmation email on Monday, so my Steam Deck is on the way. So of course there'll be more content involving the WIN 3 and the Steam Deck when that comes, and I'll finally be able to do a review and a comparison, so I'm super excited about that. But before I get the Steam Deck, let's talk about this device. Now, this is a very unique device. Of course, if you watch my first video, my first review was about after a week of having it. So now that I've had it a lot longer and have used it on a daily basis, I have some additional thoughts on it. But the first thing I want to touch on is the hardware. So how is that held up? And for me, it's held up extremely well. Now, I will say that I'm one of those people that's pretty gentle with my gaming stuff. Like, I've never broken a controller before, except for the Switch controllers, of course, with the Joy-Con drift. But that's less of me breaking it and more of it, breaking itself. But I'm not overly aggressive with controllers or throwing stuff or anything like that. And everything's held up well. The triggers are held up well. I was concerned about it because specifically the R2 and the L2, you can kind of see the spring inside of it. So I was concerned about the longevity of that. But again, I've had no issues with that. The thumbsticks falling off was an issue. So what I did was I put a little piece of clear tape around the part that the thumbstick goes on, so that way I can still pull the thumbstick off when I need to, but they don't fall off anymore, like especially if I turn the device upside down. The D-pad feels great up here. I really love the D-pad, as well as the face buttons. Starting to select are pretty clicky, and the thumbsticks themselves are a little bit on the smaller side for me. I prefer some bigger thumbsticks. I also think I like the thumbsticks where it's a little bit sunken in at the top versus the more dome ones with the grip like these have. Plus they're a little bit on the smaller side. So that's the only knock I have on them. They feel similar to like the PS2 thumbsticks, just a little bit smaller. So they're not bad. They're very usable, but I would prefer something a little bit bigger. Of course, there might be third-party options for the thumbsticks since they do come off so easily. Other than the thumbsticks, everything's held up well. The sliding mechanism for the keyboard has been completely fine. The keyboard is usable for shortcut keys, just not for typing. It's still not a great typing experience, but that sliding mechanism in the keyboard's been fine. The switch to go between controller and mouse functionality has also been fine as well. I haven't seen any issues with that. The functionality itself, sometimes switching to the mouse doesn't work and I have to reboot it. I did do a firmware update that helped with that issue. It was worse when I first got it, so that doesn't happen as often, but the actual hardware is fine. That's more of a software issue. There's also the two back buttons. I just use them for OS shortcuts. So one for me is Alt Control Delete, the other one is Alt Enter, so I can go full screen on emulators. So that's it with the hardware update. Everything is held up extremely well. Also have not taken this case off. The grip case makes this thing so much better. I highly recommend it. And they're also only like $10 on eBay. I overpaid for this by buying it from Amazon, so don't buy it from Amazon like I did. Just get a cheaper one. The grip case, again, I strongly recommend it, especially if you plan on playing this thing portable. Now let's talk about the gaming experience. So not much has changed from my initial opinion. The biggest issue with the gaming from my first video was the fact that Intel's drivers are so hit and miss for games, and we're still seeing the same thing. I finally bought WWE 2K22 after playing 2K20 up here, which ran excellent, and then 2K22 just has this weird graphical glitch where like any kind of extra texture on the wrestler just, for one, causes the body part to go partially invisible, and then it just stretches to like infinity. It doesn't make any sense, but the game itself runs fine. I can get 60 out of it if I lower the settings and lower the crowd density. So aside from the graphical glitch, it runs fine. Of course, there are going to be certain games that you're just going to be limited because they're designed to run on beefier machines. For instance, God of War on here, even with FSR on and using ultra performance mode, with all the settings at the minimum, I'm still averaging around 20-ish frames per second. Like, it's kind of playable, but in ultra performance mode, it looks really bad. It looks really blurry. So it's really not the ideal way to play it. I really wasn't able to squeeze any better performance out of God of War. And in that specific scenario where you're like on the edge of it almost being performant, to me, it's better to just go ahead and stream. So I've actually been streaming a lot more from my desktop computer. So I have a desktop that has a Ryzen 3700X and a 3080. So streaming from that computer on here on my local network, it looks better because I'm running at Ultra on my computer and it's getting a full 60 frames consistently. So it's a lot more responsive than just running it natively. So I'd say if you're on the edge of performance on like a handheld device in general, it's probably going to be better like if you do have another computer that's more powerful and you can stream from there. The streaming is probably going to perform better than running it natively at that point. The other thing I've been playing around with, of course, are emulators. So my main one has been PS2. So last video I was playing some Tony Hawk. I actually ended up playing through Def Jam Vendetta up here. PS2 games is awesome. Like, you get excellent battery life because it doesn't really stress this machine to run PS2 games like that. So really, if I had one of the apps to modify the TDP, I could probably get even better battery life while emulating games. But I usually play for like a few hours and then I have no issues with battery. I go out and I'm still like around 30 or 40%. So with things like emulated games and more indie titles, the battery life's definitely a lot better. Something like God of War, I usually get less than an hour, to be honest. I did play God of War when I first bought it, and yeah, my battery ran down pretty quick. Battery life's really going to be hit or miss, especially when you're trying to run like a AAA title. I've also started dabbling in PS3 emulation, which just seems to be a mess right now in general. But I know Demon's Souls is a game that runs pretty well emulated, so I did try that, and yeah, that actually runs pretty well up here. I also play a little bit of Infamous. The frame rate is kind of and that's not just with the Win 3. I even tried it with the 1080 Ti and it was still at, so I think it just might be that game. So technically this can run PS3 games, kind of. I just started playing with it a few days ago, so I haven't played around with PS3 emulators too much, but so far I've been really impressed. Now, someone mentioned in the comments of the last video when I complained about the graphics issues with Intel that you technically can overcome that with an eGPU. So I did do a video. I got a GPU enclosure with the 1080 Ti and kind of using this in dock mode as a secondary computer so I can play games in the other room with my husband because he has his desktop in his office, so I bring this in there and it is excellent. And also you can just hook up the eGPU and still play stuff on the screen. Now you do lose some performance because it's sending this information to the GPU and then sending it back to the screen, versus if you have it going to like an external display, it's sending it to the GPU and the GPU is outputting it. So there is some additional performance loss, and plus in general you lose about 20 to 30% of performance with an eGPU depending on the graphics card, but it's still significantly more powerful than, you know, if you just dock this thing and try to play games without a graphics card, especially going up to a higher resolution. I don't want to hop too much into the eGPU thing, but I will say that having Thunderbolt and being able to add an eGPU will significantly extend the life of a device like this. Because if you think about something, you know, that doesn't have Thunderbolt, it doesn't have the ability to use an eGPU. Once our hardware is old enough, you're going to be limited to just emulators and indie games, which is fine. But with this, you can still dock it and play way more powerful games. So once the hardware and this is, you know, old and out of fashion, you can still hook up an eGPU and get a lot more life out of this, especially if you plan on using it as a desktop, which there have been some people that comment and say that they use it as their main computer. And this one guy said he does music with it, which I thought was awesome. And I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. This thing is like super portable. And that's kind of what GPD markets this as, or their devices in general, as like computers that can game, at least with the Win line. So when I initially bought this, I was just thinking of this as being like, you know what, I'm going to get this kind of in preparation for the Steam Deck. Because, you know, at that point I was months away from Q3 and I didn't even know if I was going to be at the beginning of Q3, which ironically I was. But it's just a lot more than that. Like, the complete story of this is a lot more than just being a gaming handheld. It really is an overall good machine for productivity. And the fact that it runs Windows, and there's a lot of stuff that I play on Game Pass too, and there's games that I have on Epic Game Store, and I can just install all of these up there. For instance, like that Ninja Turtles game came out and it was on Game Pass on day one, and I was able to just download and play it. Like, if I had the Steam Deck, I would have had to get the Steam version of it, or I would have had to stream it in order to play it. So just being able to install all those stores and run any game that I want to is just super convenient as well. But we can't really talk about the Steam Deck without mentioning the place that we're in as far as the competition. And there is a lot of competition in this space, even more competition than when I made the first video 3 months ago. So both AYN Neo and this newer company, AYN, have both released devices that are around $300 to $400. Now, they do run Windows and they are using lower end AMD and Intel chips, so you would expect to run like maybe some 2D games up there, or maybe run some emulators like maybe Nintendo DS or something like that. I don't know how well they're going to do with some of the 3D emulators that might be able to do like PlayStation and N64 and probably Dreamcast, since those also run on mobile devices. But yeah, if you want to do that kind of stuff, then they're going to have those devices. Of course, then you do have the Steam Deck, which they just double the shipments, and that starts off at $400, and you get the full performance. The only thing you don't get is the storage with that. So that's also a compelling option. And then also, like with the AYN Loki, they have a higher end version that's going to start around the $500 mark. So if you do want a handheld that just plays PC games, there are cheaper options than this. Of course, with a lot of those devices, because they're running AMD chips, including the Steam Deck, you don't get Thunderbolt, so you don't get that eGPU support. But if you don't care about that, then there are some cheaper options coming down the pike. And then, of course, you could always join the waitlist for the Steam Deck as well if you already haven't done that. So this might not be the best device if that's your main concern. This is super powerful, but again, it's not the best deal if you just want a gaming device. Also, within GPD's own lineup, GPD is releasing the WIN MAX 2 tomorrow. So that's going to be out there, and that's running 12th gen Intel chips. So a lot more powerful, graphics are way better. And this came out in early 2021, and we still haven't had a successor to it or anything with 12th gen Intel yet, so this is probably due for a refresh soon. That really makes it hard to recommend new. Kind of like when I said in my original video, this is something that I would recommend if you could find a good used deal on it, probably $700 to $800 around that price range. If not, then there's always the WIN MAX 2, which is out tomorrow, or as of the recording of this video at least, so July 7th. Or wait for the newer version of this, whether it's an updated WIN 3 or it's a WIN 4. And like I said, if you don't specifically care about Intel or Thunderbolt or any of that stuff, and you just want a gaming handheld PC, there are some cheaper AMD options out there. But if you do like this hardware and this form factor, I personally like the smaller handhelds. It has a slide-up keyboard, and you have Thunderbolt, you have a fingerprint reader. You basically have all the stuff you need for a pretty cool like portable computer, as well as a pretty good portable handheld gaming experience and a capable desktop. Like technically you can do an eGPU and video edit off of this. Like this could be your whole computer. Then I still think that this is worth it. Again though, there's probably going to be new stuff on the horizon, so if you're thinking about buying this new, I wouldn't. Personally, this is definitely my favorite device. As horrible as it sounds, I didn't want to bring this into it, but I really haven't played my Switch since I got this. I've just been playing everything up here, and eventually I will go back and finish Pokemon Arceus, but I'm not in any rush. There's been so many PC games that I've been playing up here. I've been playing stuff in my library that's just been there for years that I haven't touched, just because this is so much more accessible for me, especially when I'm working and I don't have access to my computer because I'm using both my monitors for my work computer. So I can stream stuff from my computer or I can run games up here, and this has been a super cool tool to have. It's really going to be difficult when I get the Steam Deck to see if that's going to be able to pull me away from this, because literally I've used this every day now, and the Steam Deck is cool, and I'm definitely going to use it, and I think I'll like it, but I don't think it's going to replace this as my daily. I think this is probably going to be my daily for a long time. Well, we'll see how I feel after I get the Steam Deck, and hopefully a few days maybe. If I do get it, then I'll have a video next Wednesday, probably an unboxing video. If not, then I'll just save it for the week after next. But that's where I'm at with the WIN 3 after 3 months. I still think it's an awesome hybrid computer that's super powerful and super upgradable, and it does have its shortcomings, especially with the Intel graphics, things like the thumbstick issue, but there's really nothing else like it. There's no other gaming computer with a slide-up keyboard like this, and I think that's what drew me to this, like the size of it and the form factor, the capabilities, like all the things that this thing does is just awesome. So that's why I love the GPD WIN 3. I actually like it more than when I first got it, and I already liked it a lot, but this is definitely one of my favorite devices now. But let me know what you think in the comments. Do you have a WIN 3? Are you looking at one? Are you looking at one of the alternatives? Again, let me know, and I'm bringing this video to a close. But if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell notification to get notified when I drop a video, and always do at least 2 things at the same time.